Hello, everyone. It's good to have you on this call. Let's just give ourselves about half a minute whilst everybody else gets connected. And once you're on, please let us know where you're joining us from. And if we met recently at the Business School Festival, either in October or last August, please feel free to let me know. It's lovely to reconnect with a few of you so soon after we came to the Business School Festival in your city. So if you had met me last week in either Accra, Lagos, Nairobi, or Kigali, or if you had met me last August in either Lagos, Abuja, Accra, Nairobi, or Johannesburg, please let me know as well. Happy to reconnect with all of you once again. So we are waiting for a few more people to get on board. Let me know where you're joining us from. And if we had met recently as well, let me know. I see Adeboye Alade. Hi, Adeboye. How are you doing? Good to see you here. At this point, we have over 80 people joining us from around Africa. I see Efwa Kwelabi. Hello, Efwa. How are you? I also see Amidia Asifue. Hi, Amidia. Abdul Karir Olokodana. How are you also? And I see a couple of hands up as well. There will be a time for questions, so just be patient. I will allow you at the right time to keep your hand up. But in the chat, feel free to tell me where you're reaching us from or where you're joining us from, and also let us know if you've recently been at the Seed Business School Festival. Feel free to put that in the chat. So I see Beryl joining us from Nairobi. Beryl, you were at last week's Business School Festival in Nairobi on the 22nd of October. Pleased to meet you here. Jeanne Damore. Jeanne is joining us from Rwanda. Jeanne, pleased to see you again. We are happy to have you here on this call. We'll start in the next 2 minutes. We are just a few people away from 100, and we should start pretty soon.
I think the chat might be turned off, Jojo.
Let me fix that right away. In the meantime, I've seen a few people join us on the Q&A, and that's fine. I'll enable the chat in a bit. So at exactly 7:05, we will start.
We're on 100. We just hit 100.
Awesome. So here we go. Hi, everyone. As we've hit 100, I would like us to start. Today, the topic for today's session is building a strong business school application strategy. And we have joining us a very experienced admission strategist with several years experience. She's been in higher education for over 10 years, most recently She was Director of Admissions at Imperial College Business School. And proud to that, she was also Head of MBA Recruitment and Admissions at Cambridge Judge Business School. Two business schools you had met recently during the events in Accra, Lagos, Nairobi, and Kigali as well. She's currently the lead consultant at Empower Admissions. And without much ado, let me welcome Amy Duckworth with her presentation on building a strong business school application. Amy, over to you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. It's a pleasure to be here. As Jojo said, I am the founder and principal consultant at Empower Admissions Consulting. And prior to that, I was working as Director of Admissions at Imperial and Head of MBA Recruitment and Admissions at Cambridge. So I've got a lot of history in, a lot of experience and history in business school admissions, and I'm going to share with you some tips on how to get started and take the next steps towards your own MBA journey. I'm just going to share my slides, if that's okay. We will have time for questions. So can you see my screen?
Yes, I can.
Yes, I can. Okay, excellent. So there will be time for questions. So if anything comes to mind, feel free to pop it in the Q&A and in the Q&A box, and then we will go through questions at the end. So yeah, don't worry, there will be plenty of time for that. So today we're talking about how to get started with applying to business school, strategy, story, and support. So this is following on from the previous session where we talked about maximizing the engagements with business schools at events like the Seed Festival you attended. And so this is really the next step and actions and things to think about as you move forward with applying to business school, whether that's in the next couple of months or whether that's a year from now. These are all tips and advice that hopefully will get you started on the right path. So, yeah, we've had the introduction already, but yeah, as you can see, I've been working as an admissions consultant for just over a year now, providing consultancy services to applicants like yourselves and to business schools. And one of the things that I'm most passionate about is supporting others with their personal and professional development. So that's one of the reasons that I set up Empower Admissions Consulting. So during today's session, we are going to talk about application strategy. So when to apply, how many schools to apply to, how long to spend on your application, and which round to apply in, as most schools have multiple admissions rounds. We're also going to talk about what business schools look for, so some of the key qualities and themes that you should be reflecting throughout your application, and in particular thinking about your essay responses. We're also going to talk about how to tell your career story, so how to structure your CV and to clearly communicate your career goals and the progression that you've had in your career to date. And we're also going to cover letters of recommendation, so understanding what they're for, why business schools want them, what they use them for, how to choose the right referees, and how to guide the conversation with your referees ahead of them actually submitting those letters of recommendations to the school. So application strategy. So in terms of when to apply, I mean, this is really a personal decision, and it depends a lot on your own career journey and when an MBA most makes sense for you. But one of the things that I would recommend looking at is the class profile of the schools that you're interested in. So look at what's the minimum amount of work experience that they require. But not just that, what is the average and what's the range in the cohort? So, if their minimum required work experience is 3 years, it could be that the average amount of work experience in the cohort is actually more like 6 or 7 years. And then, making sure that your work experience kind of fits within the typical range for that program, because ultimately, that's kind of the career stage that program is designed for. And if you're not sure, then you can absolutely reach out to the school and you can ask them for guidance on whether the program is the right fit for you. But looking at the class profile is a really good indication of whether your work experience might align with the typical range within the class. And in terms of deciding whether it's the right time or not, I mean, there's normally a number of different opportunities in your career when an MBA makes sense. So it's thinking about, if you're targeting a particular change in your career, if you want to change perhaps your the company or the role or the function, or the geographic region, does that make sense now in your career? Or actually, if you've recently received a big promotion, or a promotion is on the cards very soon, perhaps it makes sense to wait. So it's really a personal decision, and it really kind of thinking about how the MBA fits with your own career journey. So how many schools to target? So typically candidates apply for between 3 and 5 business schools. I would say that any more than 5, any more than 5, it is a big investment of time to prepare a good quality MBA application. So you need to think about how you're investing your time, and if you're applying to 10 schools, are you spreading yourself too thinly, and are those applications going to be really good quality? Also, are there 10 schools that you genuinely really want to attend? Because it's an MBA program is a big investment of time and money, so you really want to be applying to schools that you would be genuinely very excited to attend and happy to attend. So I think between 3 and 5 is great. I definitely wouldn't recommend just applying to one. You don't want to kind of pin all of your hopes on one school. But yeah, somewhere between 3 and 5 is a good number to think about. How long to spend on each application? Well, I would recommend that you start preparing your application 3 to 6 months before the deadline that you're targeting. So if you're thinking of applying for round 1 in the next admission cycle, then you want to be starting to think about that in the new year. But yeah, 3 to 6 months is a good amount of time. Obviously, it is possible to apply in a shorter amount of time. It's just going to be more stressful for you, and you won't have the time in between the drafts of your essays and other aspects of your application to pause and reflect and take that time, because actually completing the application is a bit of a journey in itself, and you need to allow yourself enough time for that. And your application will be stronger for it. Generally, if an application is rushed, that will be obvious, and that will kind of be telling for the person reviewing it. So investing that time in preparing your application is really worth it. And then finally, which round to apply in. So most business schools have multiple admissions rounds. Schools will often advise you to apply early. And that is really worth doing, particularly if you are hoping for scholarship funding. Generally speaking, the schools will have more scholarship funding available in the earlier rounds, and as you get through the admission cycle towards the later rounds, the amount of funding available will have reduced, and it will be harder to secure scholarship funding. That being said, I wouldn't advise applying. I wouldn't advise applying early at the expense of the quality of your application. So it's not something to rush. And there are still places available even in the final rounds. The schools wouldn't have those deadlines if there weren't still places available. So if you do still want to apply towards the end of the cycle, then you absolutely can still do that, and don't be put off by people saying, oh, you just have to apply early. But do think about the scholarship funding, because that is an important reason for applying earlier. So if you are applying in later rounds and scholarship funding is important, just check that there is still funding available. So some do's and don'ts for your application strategy. So do make sure that you meet the school's work experience requirement. If the school requires 3 years of full-time post-graduation work experience, so that wouldn't include typically things like internships or work placements that you've done during your undergraduate studies. If you apply to a school that has that requirement and you only have, say, 1.5 years of post-graduation work experience, you're not going to be eligible. So you're spending all of that time and that money on the application fee, and it's, you know, and you won't be eligible. So do make sure that you meet their work experience requirement. So do be realistic. So you need to look at the academic requirements of the school you're applying for, and think, you know, it's absolutely fine to apply to a school that you think is a bit of a stretch and, you know, is a, you know, very ambitious. But if you're applying to 3 schools, don't apply for 3 that are all stretch schools. Think about having a backup as well. So looking at the academic requirements, looking at the GMAT and GRE scores, being realistic about, you know, about your chances of admission, and having a range of options in the sort of amongst the schools that you're applying to. Give yourself time. It will take longer than you think, and you're all busy, you're all working. So give yourself time, and don't rush it, and don't think, oh, I'll be able to get that done in 1 week, you know, in evenings after work, because you won't. Some don't apply to schools that you wouldn't actually be willing to attend. So even though, you know, I'm saying you might want to think about having a couple of, you know, safety schools, kind of backup options, don't apply to places that you wouldn't be willing to attend, because again, that's a waste of time and effort. Don't pin all your hopes on one school. As I was saying, don't apply just to one school, and don't rush to apply in an early round if you are not ready. So those are some kind of, you know, key do's and don'ts to think about in your application strategy. So we'll now talk a little bit about what schools are actually looking for. So obviously, as someone who's been on the other side, who's been in the who's been on the school side working in admissions, I have a good understanding of what makes candidates stand out and what the schools are looking for. So I'm going to share a little bit of that insight with you now. So I'm going to just start off by busting a bit of a myth. I think that there's this often this idea that there is an ideal candidate that schools want to admit, that they have, like, you know, who's your ideal candidate? You know, I've been asked that multiple times. What's the ideal candidate? And that is really a complete myth, because there is no ideal candidate. The truth is that the schools value diversity. There is no one type of candidate that they want to attract and admit. One of the key things about doing an MBA program is that you have this peer-to-peer learning, where you learn from the other people in the classroom, and you learn from your peers just as much as you learn from the content of the curriculum and the professors. That isn't possible if everyone in the cohort is the same type of candidate. They will have the same experience, the same perspective. Actually, the schools don't want that. What they want is the diversity, and they want the different perspectives and candidates from different backgrounds, all in that cohort together. So that's a complete myth that there isn't a type of candidate that they're looking for. The schools, they absolutely don't have that. So there are some key qualities and themes that they are looking for. So one of the things would be collaboration. So typically there'll be a lot of group work and projects throughout an MBA program. So how well do you work with others? Do you listen to other people's perspectives? Are you open to other ideas? Are you able to adapt your style to those you're working with? So thinking about your collaborative skills, when have you worked effectively in a team or a group in the past, and how can that come across in your application? Curiosity. So business schools are looking for people who are open-minded, intellectually curious, people who will challenge the status quo. Communication skills. So how well do you communicate with others? How do you share your ideas? Are you able to manage negotiations and influencing people? Self-awareness, this is a really important one when it comes to the essay questions. So demonstrating, when you look back at your own experiences and the examples you provide in the essays, showing that self-awareness and actually, understanding yourself and what you could have done and what you could have done differently in certain situations. Leadership potential. So it's not the case that you have to have had leadership experience when you apply for an MBA. You don't have to have directly line managed people normally, unless the school explicitly states that, but it's not common. They don't need to see, a track record of leadership and line management. What they are looking for is leadership potential. So, maybe you haven't been line managing anyone yet, maybe you haven't been leading anything yet, but how have you demonstrated that leadership potential? And so this is something where, if you haven't had the opportunity to do that as part of your professional role in the company where you're working, maybe this is something you've been able to develop elsewhere, maybe in some initiatives you're involved in outside of work, or some volunteering, or some extracurricular activities. So think about the transferable skills and think about where you've had the opportunity to demonstrate leadership potential. Open-mindedness. This is really important as well. So, you'll be working with people from many different backgrounds from all over the world. How open are you to seeing things from other people's point of view? Have you had any opportunities so far to work with people from different backgrounds in diverse teams, and people from other nationalities, people different from yourself? So think about that in your application as well, and a global perspective. So what I'm thinking again about international exposure. And international exposure doesn't necessarily mean living or studying in a different country. It could mean working with a diverse portfolio of clients, or working in a multicultural team where you've had to demonstrate that cultural sensitivity. So just thinking about how your experiences might translate into some of these key qualities and themes that the schools are looking to see. We're now going to move on and talk about how to tell your career story, and I'll just check how we're doing for time. I think we're okay. So we're going to talk about how to tell your career story. So obviously, one of the key drivers for undertaking an MBA program is your career. So whether that's career progression, whether it's career acceleration, whether it's a career switch, and schools want to see what you've achieved so far before you're actually starting the program, because one of the biggest indicators of future success is past achievement. So how do you present the experiences that you've had to date in your professional life? What is the purpose of a CV in a business school application? So this is really about showing the impact that you've had in your professional life so far, and by extension, where you aim to go. What you want your CV to do is to demonstrate key achievements, areas where you've had growth, leadership, and potential. And you want to showcase that you'll be an asset to the class and the school, both now and in your future career. So really, the CV is is kind of a snapshot of you and your profile. So what to include in your CV? So academics, that should typically come first, and you want to include the institution, the subject you studied, and the grade. Any professional qualifications as well. So perhaps if you've done something like the CFA or any other professional qualification, that should also be listed on your CV. Then your work experience, and make sure that you include your job title, the company name, the location, and the dates. And that will be the dates for each role that you've held at that company. So if you've had multiple roles at that company, say you've been promoted, it's important to highlight that, because career progression is one of the things that the schools are looking for, evidence of clear career progression. And the CV is a key place that they will expect to see that. Then any relevant technical skills. So that could be programming languages, it could be IT skills, it could be different languages that you speak. Any relevant skills should also be listed on the CV. And then any key achievements, so any awards or recognitions, maybe if you were chair of a committee or you were nominated for some award, either that could be in your academic life or your professional life, those are also things to include on your CV. And finally, interests and extracurriculars. So this is quite important because this adds another dimension to your application, and this shows a little bit more of your personality and who you are outside of work and your academic achievements. And my advice on the extracurriculars is don't just put one word, like a list of, I don't know, tennis, swimming, running, actually try and give a bit more context and a bit more detail. For example, it might be that football is on there, and actually perhaps you've been doing some football coaching. Like those are the things to include. Don't just put football. Actually include that detail, because that's far more useful to the admissions officer reviewing your application than just a one word football, because that could be anything. It could be that you just play in the park at the weekend, or it could be that you were like a semi-professional football player. So yeah, just make sure to give that context so that what you actually put on the CV is meaningful. And this is the key things. These are the key things that the schools are looking for when you think about your CV. So obviously the academics, so academic performance, they want to make sure that you will be able to handle the academic rigor of the program. And so they want to see your previous academics, your previous academic results and your previous academic performance. That's important as a key indicator of how you might perform on the program. If your undergraduate academics, your GPA is a bit lower, on the lower side, not to worry, that this is where the GMAT or the GRE can be really helpful for you. And this is where you can potentially compensate for that lower GPA with a higher GRE or GMAT score. As I was saying before, career progression, so showing a clear route and that development and growth that you've had. If you haven't had specific promotions, as in change of job title, think about how to highlight any increases in responsibility that you've taken on and how you've grown in a role. International exposure, so as I was saying, that doesn't need to just be limited to living or studying in a different country. It could also be in terms of the portfolio of clients you've worked with or the teams that you've managed. So think about how you might be able to evidence that international exposure in your application. And then for each of the roles that you've held, achievement outcome focused bullet points demonstrating drive and initiative. So not just a job description. It needs to be focused on what you have achieved, your impact and achievement in each role that you've held. And if you can quantify those achievements and impacts, then brilliant. If you can't, don't worry. Not all achievements can be quantified, but if you can, then absolutely do that. And overall, written with clarity, impact, and relevance. You're aiming for a one-page CV. That's what most MBA programs want. So everything that you put on that CV needs to have a purpose for being there. It needs to be, there's no room for duplication. It all needs to, to really have a reason for you having included it. And think about the transferable skills that you're demonstrating. So something that might not appear, immediately relevant for business school could actually show some important transferable skills. So, thinking about how your experiences demonstrate those transferable skills that schools are looking for. And clear personal impact shows who you are. So this we were saying before, this myth about business schools looking for a type of candidate is completely untrue. It's important to show your personality, and it's important for you to be authentic. And the CV is just one of the ways that you kind of show who you are in the admissions process. In terms of the format of your CV, so ideally this should be one page, and definitely no more than two. Most schools prefer a one-page CV for MBA applications. So if they've said that they only want one page, definitely only one page. Even if they haven't said it, I would still advise it. If they have a template, many schools do, then I would definitely recommend using their template. It makes it much smoother process for the person reviewing your application. And it also shows that you've put in that effort to actually use their preferred format for the CV. I would advise against the use of color and images. Most of the business school CV templates are just straightforward black and white. So it's not the place to get creative with colors and images. Yes, sorry, those are the key things on the CV. So I'll also just cover letters of recommendation as well, because I think this is another area where there are quite a lot of myths. So overall, the purpose of a letter of recommendation in a business school application, it's to offer an external perspective on the candidate. So obviously you've said X, Y, Z about yourself. Actually, this is offering a different perspective on you and the examples and the details and experiences that you've shared in your application. It provides insight into your character and soft skills. It adds credibility to the application. So it's not just what you're saying about yourself. This is actually what somebody else is kind of saying about you, and how that validates what you've said about yourself. It demonstrates evidence and examples of qualities and skills in practice. So, you may have said that certain things about your own skills and strengths, and this demonstrates evidence of that. So it's important that the person who writes your letter of recommendation knows you well and can actually provide these detailed insights. And remember that the letter of recommendation will be viewed alongside the rest. The letter of recommendation will be viewed alongside the rest of your application. So it's important that that kind of all aligns, and that you haven't said one thing and the letter of recommendation gives a completely different version. And it enables some benchmarking against peers. So often business schools in their letter of recommendation request will ask the recommender to compare the applicant or candidate against others in that kind of similar pool professionally. So it allows for some benchmarking. And it serves as an authenticity and consistency check. So as I was saying, you've provided certain examples and said certain things. Does this back it up, or does it contradict it? So who to ask? This is often something that people are unsure about. Ideally, this should be a direct line manager or a supervisor. So it could be your current line manager or supervisor. If you don't want to tell your current manager or supervisor that you are potentially leaving, and you're obviously applying for MBA programs. I know some people are worried about that because they feel like it could hurt their chances for promotion or progression at work. That's completely fair. Normally business schools will be happy with a former line manager or supervisor as well, if you don't want to ask your current one. It should be someone who knows you well and who has worked closely with you. So this is where I would really advise against don't asking the most senior person that you know. Often people think that the more senior the person who writes the letter of recommendation, the better. That's completely untrue, because if that person doesn't know you well and can't provide those detailed insights and examples, then it's not going to be a very useful letter of recommendation. It needs to have that detail, and it needs to have those examples. So it really needs to come from someone who knows you well and has worked closely with you. So it doesn't matter, if it's from the CEO. If you don't work closely with the CEO, then they won't be able to write you a good letter of recommendation. Also, if you ask someone and they kind of say, oh, you write it, just write it yourself, also don't do that, because that's quite obvious in the style of writing when someone's reviewing an application. If the letter of recommendation has been written by them, it's often quite apparent. It should be someone with whom you feel comfortable discussing your career goals and your future plans. So someone that you know well, someone that you're happy to have those conversations with, in an ideal world. If you are an entrepreneur or work in a family business, then obviously you can't write your own, and a family member would not be an appropriate person to write a letter of recommendation. You could normally ask a client or a supplier. Often business schools are happy with those. Also, if you want to ask someone who, for example, is no longer with the company or is retired or on maternity leave, that's also fine. Normally, the schools want the letter of recommendation to come from a professional email address. So if it isn't, if it isn't coming from that, say it's a retired person and it's going to be a personal email address, then you'll just need to add a note in the additional information in your application form to explain why that is. Some do's and don'ts for letters of recommendation. So do check the school's letter of recommendation requirements. Do check with the person first, make sure to ask their permission and that they're happy to do it. And do speak with them about your application and about your goals, both your goals around the MBA and your future career goals. Don't ask someone who doesn't know you well, however impressive you think they might sound. The business school, the admissions team at the business school will not mind, if they have an impressive job title or not. That doesn't matter. Don't ask someone who doesn't have time. So someone who's going to say, oh yeah, just write it yourself or something. You don't want that. You really need someone who's going to invest the time in writing this for you. And as I've said, don't worry about the level of seniority of your recommender. They do need to be a line manager or supervisor, but it doesn't need to be someone who's very senior at the company. Okay, so we're going to move on to questions shortly, but before we do, I'll just highlight that you're very welcome to connect with me on LinkedIn. You can also see my website and my email address there, so you can reach out if you're looking for any one-to-one guidance. And I also just wanted to share details of the Empower Admissions group coaching series. So this is an exclusive offer for Seed. And this is basically 3 small group interactive sessions, so only 10 places, and the sessions will cover your career narrative, clarifying your journey and goals, the admissions essays, and then interview preparation. And they the kind of bonus is that it also includes a full review of one MBA application, and you'll receive actionable tailored feedback. So the dates are just there on the screen there, and the QR code leads to the booking page. This is kind of ideal, definitely, if you're thinking about applying for January deadlines or even March. This is kind of perfect, in that you'll get that feedback ahead of the January deadline. So if you've got any questions about this program, you can reach out to me. As I said, it's small groups, so that it's very kind of personalized. But yeah, so 10 places, and you can book with the QR code or send me an email if you've got more questions about it. We'll go back to questions now, and I'll hand back to Jojo.
Thank you very much, Amy. And thanks to everyone for staying with us up to this point. I will take some of the questions from the Q&A, and I'll also give an opportunity for some of you to speak. So if you have a question you wish to present, you may raise your hand. But in the meantime, let me go to Brenda. Brenda, you joined us from Kigali, I think. So Brenda is asking about CV. So Brenda says that for certain application tracking systems, it's recommended that I use a plain Word document, or whether it's Word document or a PDF, but in a plain text format, for your information to be better picked up or accessed by the application tracking system. And she's wondering if she should do the same, or she can just pick a template of the internet that is a one-pager and be able to use it, and that should be fine. Is there any preference, Amy?
Is it for the CV?
For the CV, yes.
For the CV. So if the school provides a template, so yes, plain black and white format, yes. If the school provides a template, then I would recommend using that template. If they don't provide a template, then yeah, you could find a one-page CV template online, but it should be a simple black and white format. Lots of business schools have them downloadable on their website under the application information.
Great. Now there's another question also from Hudson. So Hudson has 2 questions on academic performance. So I'll ask both together. Now Hudson wants to know how schools evaluate academic performance across different education systems. So such as Hudson is in Rwanda, I'm in Accra. How are we assessed at the same level to ensure that he has a fair assessment to get into business school? His second question is that if his grades are good, but not excellent, how else can he strengthen his application?
Yeah, that's a good question. So yeah, typically business schools receive applications from a lot of international candidates from all over the world. So they will have their own internal equivalency guidance that will cover a lot that will cover international qualifications. So they are used to receiving applications from all over the world. They'll have a policy on this, and they will they'll have guidance on each of the different grading systems in each of in the countries where they're receiving applications from. So yeah, it will be assessed. Just to add to this, I would not recommend trying to convert your grade into any kind of other system. So don't convert it yourself. Just apply with the grade as it's stated on your transcript or certificate, and let the school assess it and convert it and look at the equivalency, because they'll have their own equivalency policies. And if you try and convert it, then normally it will just cause some confusion, because the grade that you've put on there won't be present on your transcript, so it will just be a bit confusing. So just use the grade as it appears on your transcript. I think the second part of the question was, I'm sorry, Jojo.
So the second part of the question was about the fact that if one's grades are good, but they are not excellent, how else can that person strengthen the application?
Yeah, so the academics are just one part of an MBA application, and they are important, but they are only one part. So just having brilliant academics does not guarantee you a place on an MBA program, because what the schools are doing is they're making a holistic assessment, and they are looking at your work experience. They're looking at your essay questions. They're looking at how they feel you would contribute to the cohort, your career goals. They're looking at all of these factors. So it's not the academics are important, but they're not the only thing. So in terms of how to stand out, I mean, obviously you've got if the school requires GMAT or GRE, that's one thing. The rest would be around your work experience and career goals, and then the rest, your essay questions and interview performance. So really investing that time in preparing a strong application, because those are all really important factors that the schools look at when they are assessing an applicant.
Great. Now, I've seen a number of questions around scholarships, so I would like to address that before we proceed. So yes, different schools have different scholarship options. There isn't one universal answer as to whether a school has scholarships or not. It's up to you to investigate. It's up to you to research. All the programs that you seek in the different schools have program web pages that will have additional information about scholarships. So check that out in order for you to be able to make your decision. Because I've seen quite a number of different scholarship questions in that regard. Now, there's a question from Peter. Peter is from Kenya. So Peter's interests are not directly business. Okay. So he has a background in security, criminology, mostly in the security and the legal side. And he has interest in leadership, ethical leadership, risk management, which are sort of transferable. And he's wondering how someone in this position, and this Peter's question stretches across everyone else who is not from a business school background. He's wondering how these experiences can position him as an asset on his business school application.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So a lot of people think that, you know, they'll be at a disadvantage if they don't have a typical MBA background or business background. That's absolutely not true. You don't need to have a business background to do an MBA. The schools are looking for diversity. They're looking for different professional experiences. That's definitely not something that will be a disadvantage. In fact, you know, the different perspectives you bring can actually be an advantage to you. So it's thinking about how to make your work experience stand out. So how to, thinking about showing the impact and achievement that you've had, and thinking about the transferable skills that you've developed as well. The other thing I would say is that you need to clearly articulate why the MBA and how it links with your career goals. And that goes for anyone from any background at all. It's actually, what's the motivation for doing an MBA? How does it link with your career goals? And what research have you already done to understand how you'll be able to make that career switch and achieve those career goals? So I think that advice really applies to people from any background.
All right. Now, there's another interesting question I saw regards letters of recommendation. Now, Mercy has an interesting perspective. She's wondering, the person she has in mind to write a letter of recommendation is not in the same field or industry as where she's worked or what she intends to do. Can they still write a letter of recommendation for them?
So it sounds as though it's someone that she hasn't worked with directly.
So there are two scenarios. Possibly, either she hasn't worked with the person, or she did work with the person in another industry, and she's moved off to another industry. She's wondering if whatever she's presented as her expertise, this person is in another field of expertise.
It doesn't matter. Yeah. So their field of expertise doesn't matter. So if you've worked with them previously and then either you've moved on to a different company and different industry or they have, that's completely fine. That doesn't matter. What they're writing about is their kind of they're writing about their insights on you and your character and your skills, your strengths. So it doesn't matter about the expertise. If it's somebody who you haven't worked with directly, perhaps you just know this person in some other way, I wouldn't advise that. It really should be someone that you've worked with closely and somebody who's been your manager or supervisor.
Thanks for this, Amy. Now, Rufina has the opposite problem concerning academic performance. Her undergraduate CGPA is awesome.
Yeah.
But her GRE didn't turn out so well.
Okay.
And she's wondering how she can strengthen the MBA application so that she could get admission and possibly get some support funding.
Yeah. So with the GMAT or GRE, the only thing I would definitely just stress that this is just one aspect of the application. And the just having a super high GMAT or GRE score doesn't guarantee anything. I've seen candidates with very high scores be unsuccessful, and I've seen candidates with lower scores be successful because the rest of their application was so good. So I think it's about it's about making sure that everything else in your application is as strong as it possibly can be. And then it depends regarding the score, how low it is. I mean, is it if the schools often provide, if they may not provide a required, like a minimum required GMAT or GRE, but they'll often provide an average for the cohort, and that's something you can ask them as well. I wouldn't ask them what's your minimum. I would ask them, what's the average in the cohort, or what's the typical range that you have in the cohort in terms of GMAT or GRE score. If your score is close, maybe consider like a near miss, then maybe that's going to be fine with the rest of your application being strong. If your score is really, really miles away from their range that they would normally have in the cohort, then you might need to think about retaking the test. So obviously, without knowing your specific score and the schools you're targeting, but this is something you can look on the school's website. They will have information in the class profile, and if it's really very far away from what the school would typically have in their cohort, then it could be a question of retaking. And actually a lot of people do end up taking the GMAT or the GRE more than once.
Okay, so I see a couple of hands up. So I'll give just two persons the opportunity to speak. We can start from Rukundo Vedasti. Rukundo, you may unmute your microphone and speak. Hi.
Hi.
Yes, you may go ahead.
Thank you so much. My name is Vedati Rukundo, and I'm from Rwanda. And my question is, could you please clarify what English language proficiency is required for applicants, or do you accept IELTS, TOEFL, or a medium for instruction letters from my university?
Okay, thank you very much, Rukundo. So Emmy, Rukundo is wondering, because English may not have been his first language of instruction, what sort of proficiency test can he submit for his master's application?
Yes. So each school will have their own policy on this. So it's important that you check with the school that you're applying to which tests they accept and what level they require. Usually IELTS and TOEFL are accepted, but in terms of the actual level that you need to achieve, or if there's any other tests they accept, you need to check the school's individual policy on this. If you've already been, if your previous studies were in English, that might you may still need to do a proficiency test, because often this is based on not the language of instruction. It's often based on the location of the institution. So if it's not a majority English speaking country, then you would still need to do the proficiency test. But yeah, as I said, it's important. This can vary. The policies on this can vary between institutions. So I would definitely recommend checking with the individual policies of the schools you're applying to.
Awesome. Rosemary, over to you.
Yes, good evening.
Hi, Rosemary.
Hi.
Hi, are you hearing me?
Very clearly, Rosemary.
Okay, I'm Rosemary. Sorry, I didn't have a chance of joining Kigali meeting at Marriott because I'm very far, but I informed you. So the question is, I'm sorry, I didn't understand. Are you going to provide the full scholarship for MBI? And the second thing, for that money, are we going to pay it for the application? And the third one is, like, for those one who has like low class or like a past degree, are they eligible to apply? Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Rosemary. So I would Amy, I'll tackle the first two questions, and then so Rosemary is asking about scholarships and application fee waivers. So Rosemary, different universities and different business schools have different funding opportunities for different programs. So I'll encourage you that you should do your research on the school that you're interested in applying to. And also do your research on what programs and funding programs they have to support applicants such as yourself. And the same applies also to the question on application fee. Some schools require application fees, some schools don't. So do your checks before you proceed to make commitment. And the third question, obviously, Amy, it's about candidates with maybe a third class or a pass first degree, and whether there's an opportunity for such candidates to get into business school as well.
So this will, I mean, this will really depend on the individual school's policy. But if your undergraduate grade is below the school's requirements, often they will still allow you to apply. But you know, it's important that other areas of your application can compensate for that. So the GMAT or the GRE is one thing, professional qualifications or certifications is another, the strength of your work experience, and the overall quality of your application. So often schools will allow that you to still apply even if your grade is slightly lower. But in order for it to be competitive, a competitive application, you do need to make sure that you stand out in other ways.
Absolutely. Now I'll go back to something that you had touched briefly on. Rufina is wondering about someone from an unconventional healthcare background.
Yeah.
Similarly, I also see Adeboye Alade also talking about the fact that he comes from a cybersecurity IT background as well, and they are all wondering how they can use these experiences to make the applications more stronger for business school.
Yeah, so don't be if you have a non-traditional background, that's completely fine. Don't let that you know, it's not a disadvantage when applying. So you know, thinking about, you know, for the experience that you've had and the roles you've held, it doesn't matter what the industry is, but what is your impact and achievement been in those roles. So that really doesn't matter, you know, in what industry or sector, but what's your impact and achievement been. And then, you know, this will help, you know, for example, in the essay questions, your examples, if they're relating to your experiences in your workplace, perhaps those are going to be different. I mean, think about people reading admissions essays. They read an awful lot of essays. So actually making sure that your application is interesting is really important, because they read a lot of applications. So make it interesting. And thinking also about, with your past experiences, how does that position you for your post MBA career goals? So, you know, if you're thinking about what you've achieved so far, your experiences so far, plus plus potentially an MBA, where are you going? What's your goal? Are there any gaps? Are there any other things you need to do in order to position yourself well to make that career transition and achieve that career goal? So thinking critically about your own skills and experiences, where can the MBA help to fill some gaps? And is there anything else you can do yourself? You know, thinking about being proactive, thinking about using your own initiative and managing your own personal and professional development. What can you do to get you one step closer to that post MBA career goal? Because often that actually starts before you even do the MBA. You know, taking ownership of that career journey and laying the groundwork so that you're in a good position for that post MBA role. That preparation really starts before you even start at business school.
Great. Now there's an interesting question from Peter Kamaina. So Peter is asking that when you look 5 years into the future, based on your experience, what qualities do you think business schools will start to value? Because he's concerned about how the world continues to advance in AI and machine learning and all the cybersecurity issues. Wondering what sort of qualities are business schools going to value in 5 to 10 years' time?
Well, a few come to mind. I would say adaptability, resilience, openness to change, managing change. There's a common theme here. Basically, things always change. And actually, you know, it's that ability to deal with that uncertainty and to manage that change and to adapt. I think that those things are really important. Schools are constantly updating their curriculums, and they're constantly adding content, because the schools are the schools obviously want to make sure that their program is preparing the graduates for their future roles and for what the employers want. So the schools are constantly constantly adding different different projects, different modules, different options, so that we're seeing a lot more AI focused content. We've also seen like a lot more contact. Sorry, I've lost my words there. We're also seeing a lot more content around business analytics. We've seen a lot more interest in sustainability, and all of these sort of global trends, these macro trends are reflected, in the MBA, in what's covered on the MBA program. So it is all linked, but I mean, some of the qualities that I was saying are really kind of that kind of cut through all of that when I'm talking about the adaptability, the resilience. Whether you graduated from business school 20 years ago, or whether 5-10 years in the future, those qualities and those characteristics are going to be important.
Right. Now, Irumba Pacific has an interesting question. And I'm happy because you work in admissions, so you have in-house experience, Amy. So Irumba is concerned. It says, how does the admissions committee reconcile potentially contradictory signals between a candidate's quantitative achievements on their CV? So, for example, rapid promotions, quantifiable metrics such as KPIs they achieved at work, how well they are done at work, what targets they've met, and then the more qualitative, narrative-based feedback in the letters of recommendation. So their CV looks excellent. They've done good things, but then the feedback coming from the qualitative feedback coming from the letters seem to say they aren't professionally, maybe they have a few faults, and the people who are writing letters maybe haven't really enjoyed working with them. And how does admission committees reconcile these contradictions?
Well, I mean, the letter of recommendation is one other perspective on the candidate. So, I think, and everyone, regardless of the situation, regardless of who they are or what they're doing, everyone has areas where there's room for development. So, a certain, it would be if a letter of recommendation pointed at some areas where the candidate could develop further, that would be fine. If the letter of that would be expected, really. If the letter of recommendation appeared to kind of contradict what the candidate had said, as in it seemed like it didn't, like it didn't, I guess the candidate said they achieved one thing, and the letter of recommendation appears to suggest that they did not achieve the thing that they said they achieved, then it could be that another letter of recommendation would be requested, or it could be that this is something that that would be kind of discussed further if the person's invited to interview, to try and kind of reconcile that those differences. It's not really something it's not something, I mean, typically, most people choose someone for their letter of recommendation who they are fairly confident is going to write something positive about them. Generally speaking, the weaker letters of recommendation that I've seen are ones where they just don't put much detail at all. And that isn't grounds to reject an applicant. It's just not very helpful. It doesn't add any weight, doesn't add any value, doesn't add anything. If it's just very very brief and not very detailed. And schools may well reach out to the person who wrote it for more detail, or they may request another letter of recommendation. So it really depends. It depends on how big the discrepancies are. And if it appears to suggest that the something the person has said on their CV is in fact not true at all, then it could be that some other follow-up and further documentation would be requested from the applicant.
Thank you, Amy. Now, before I'll take one more person looking to ask a question, but there's something that Hudson wishes to understand, which is whether international exposure or experience counts towards a favorable MBA admission chances. And in that case, for someone like him who's never lived abroad, gone abroad, stayed abroad, how is he able to demonstrate that? That's if it's relevant to his application.
I mean, I think business schools are typically very international environments, and I think that it can strengthen your profile if you've had international exposure. That doesn't necessarily mean living or working or studying in a different country. It could be working in a diverse team. It could be working with clients from different countries. It doesn't necessarily have to be through actually living in a different country. That being said, if you haven't had those opportunities in your professional life so far, that doesn't mean that you don't have a good chance of being admitted. I'm sure that you'll have strengths in other areas. So it's not an essential. It's something that can enhance your profile. But it's not an essential, and actually, if you're looking at doing an MBA internationally, actually that's a good way for you to get that international exposure if it's something you haven't had already.
All right, Amy. I'll just take one more verbal question from the audience. George Onyango, you may unmute your microphone and ask your question. George. Okay, so in the absence of George, I will permit Obed Mugisha. Obed?
Yes.
Yes, go ahead, Obed.
Good evening, everyone.
Hi, Obed.
Hi there.
Yes. On Sunday, I was there at Marriott Hotel. So I think what I had here also on the meeting, it seems like it's the same explanation, but I didn't get a chance of asking my question there. And from here, I wanted to ask, like, for me, mostly the people here, mostly in Rwanda, they face the challenge of making their application, like making the application. We used to find someone who can help us for the I think for the needs, the whole thing which concern with the application. So for me, what I was wanting to ask, like, how do you see to have an office which
Well
can
noted,
help?
Obed. Hi, Obed. I think your question is well understood. What you want to, what you're asking about is an opportunity to be supported, to be able to complete your application. Is that right? Yes. So once you attended the event on Sunday, some of our counselors will be in touch and will provide some guidance for you to be able to complete your application as well. So in that regard, I think you will get the right support that you need to be able to complete your applications. So Amy, we are out of time. We wish to round up in the next 2 minutes. My last question to you is, what final encouragement or advice you have for all these candidates who have big business school dreams and they are just starting the journey? They just started a journey last week at the Business School Festival, and they are looking to take it one more step and be able to make the right progress.
So my advice would be that I think it can feel very overwhelming. It can feel like there's a lot of information, there's a lot of decisions to make. So my advice would be to take it one step at a time. and make sure that you invest the time in really doing your research, because an MBA is a really big investment in yourself. It's a big investment of time, it's a big investment of money, big investment of effort. So make sure that you do your research and make the decisions that are right for you, and try and use all the resources that you have available to you. So lots of the schools do their own events where you can get more information from them directly. There are also, you can also reach out to current students and alumni of schools where you're interested in applying. You can attend, other upcoming events where you can, again, network and get more support. And just try and make use of all the resources available and start early, because it will feel more manageable and it will feel less stressful and overwhelming if you give yourself time, and see it as a bit of a journey, actually, and a bit of a, it's a kind of applying to business school, in a way, it's kind of a little self-discovery journey.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Amy. Amy had put email address at the end of your presentation as well. And so you can obviously reach out for further interactions as well. And I want to thank all of you from all over Africa, from Ghana to Nigeria to Kenya, Rwanda, Ethiopia, South Africa. Thank you all for making the time this evening. Remember the last piece of advice: start to take the steps towards business school, start to work on the individual steps and the individual processes you need to go through, and individual documentations as well. And eventually you will reach the end of the cycle as you hope. But that journey has to start now, and the effort has to start now. Thank you so much, Amy. We've thoroughly enjoyed this. It's been very insightful. Thanks for sharing with our audience, and thanks for breaking down and demystifying the business school application journey for them as well, from all over Africa. Do have a good evening, everyone, and take care of yourself. Bye-bye.
My pleasure. Bye, everyone.
Bye.